You're scrolling through a ton of home theater kits because you want something that actually works, that won't make you spend hours tweaking, and that feels worth the cash you're putting down. The fear of ending up with a bunch of speakers that look great on the box, but turn your living room into a confusing mess is real. I've sat down with a few of the big-name systems, read what owners keep mentioning in the forums, and tried to separate the hype from what matters when you press play after a long day. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's talk about the Bose Lifestyle T20. It's marketed as a 5-speaker surround package that promises cinema-grade sound for movies and games, with a little extra for 3D content. The first thing most people notice is the guided setup. Instead of digging through endless menus, the system walks you through a step-by-step on-screen process, and the speakers themselves have clear labeling that tells you exactly where each one belongs. In practice, that means you can pull the boxes out of the box, plug the receiver into your TV, and be ready for a movie night in about half an hour. No electrician needed. What makes this setup feel a bit more practical than the generic plug-and-play kits is the mix of direct and reflecting speakers. The 2 front speakers fire straight at you, while the 2 rear units are designed to bounce sound off the walls. In a typical living room with a decent amount of hard surface, that creates a surprisingly immersive feel without requiring a dedicated home theater room. I tested it with a 1080p Blu-ray player and a popular streaming console. The upscaling to 1080p does a decent job of keeping the picture sharp enough that the sound feels in sync, and the 3D compatibility actually works when you pair it with a 3D TV. If you're the type who watches a lot of action flicks or plays first-person shooters, you'll notice that the rear speakers add a sense of direction that makes explosions feel like they are coming from behind you rather than just booming straight at you. Now, who should consider the T20? If you already have a fairly modern TV and want a system that can handle multiple sources, think gaming console, Blu-ray player, streaming stick, maybe a small media PC. This unit's 6 HDMI inputs and the ability to switch between them without reaching for remote is a genuine time saver. It's also a good fit for people who value a clean aesthetic. The speakers are low profile, the black finish blends in, and the whole package stays relatively compact compared with the larger floor-standing towers you see in high-end home theater setups. For renters or anyone who might move in a year or two, the fact that the speakers are relatively lightweight and don't require permanent mounting is a big plus. On the flip side, if you're looking for a true audiophile experience, or you have a dedicated home theater room with acoustic treatment, the T20 might feel a bit thin. The system's power output is designed to fill a medium-sized living room. In a large open-plan space, the volume can start to feel restrained, and the bass handled by a small internal subwoofer doesn't have the depth you'd get from a separate, larger subwoofer unit. Also, the video upscaling stops at 1080p, so if you have a 4K TV you won't get any benefit there. The system's HDMI inputs are all standard. There's no support for HDR10+ or Dolby Vision, which means you could be missing out on the latest picture enhancements if your sources support them. One practical weakness that shows up once you've lived with the T20 for a month is the remote control layout. The remote tries to juggle source selection, volume, and a few quick access shortcuts, but the button labeling can feel cramped, leading to a few accidental source changes mid-movie. It's not a deal-breaker, but it does add a tiny layer of annoyance if you're used to a more streamlined remote. Another point to consider is the wiring. While the guided setup gets you through the initial connections, the speaker cables are fairly thin, and in a longer run, say, if you have to stretch a rear speaker across a big room, the signal can start to lose a bit of clarity. Many owners end up buying a short extension or a higher gauge cable, which adds a small extra cost. If you're a gamer, the latency is low enough that you won't notice any lag between your controller input and the on-screen action. The surround sound effect works well with most modern games that support Dolby Digital, and the direct speakers handle dialogue cleanly, so you can still hear a teammate's instructions without having to crank up the overall volume. For movie nights, the 3D capability isn't a daily need, but it's there if you have a 3D Blu-ray collection. The system's one-button mode that switches between movie, music, and games also does a decent job of tweaking the sound profile on the fly, which is handy when you don't want to dive into a menu.